It is case IT 9834I, the prosecutor versus Mladen Letilic, also known as Tuta, and Vinko Martinović, also known as Stella.
Merci.
Thank you.
Merci. Bien.
Thank you. And the case having been identified, before I address myself to the accused here present, I first wish to say good afternoon to the interpreters and make sure that they can hear me, the public gallery equally, who are going to participate in our debates, as is normal, in an international public tribunal. I turn myself first to the prosecutor's bench. I do not know everyone. Perhaps Brenda Hollis will introduce her colleagues, please.
Your Honor, Brenda Hollis and Vasily Porivayev appear on behalf of the prosecutor, along with the acting case manager, Patricia Reindeer.
Merci. Comment se prononce exactement?
Thank you. How exactly do you pronounce your name, Mr. Porniaev? Could you tell us, please? The best way to pronounce your name.
Best way, Vasily Porivayev.
Porivayev.
Porivayev. Will you please write it down for me in a phonetic form, Mr. Registrar? Thank you. I'm sorry about this. I turn myself to the defense. Can you please introduce yourself? Tell us which bar you belong to and what are your qualifications with the tribunal, such as you presented them to Madam the Registrar. Your Honors, my name is Branko Šerić. I'm an attorney, member of the Croatian bar, and I present Mr. Vinko Martinović. Very well. Thank you. Thank you very much. You may be seated. Mr. Registrar, have the qualifications of Attorney Selic been admitted and verified with the National Bar? How does it function? Yes, everything is in order regarding the authorization of Branko Selic. Thank you. This will be entered in the record. Now, I turn to the accused, who is appearing today for the first time, following an indictment issued against him and signed on what date, Mr. Registrar? The indictment was signed the 18th of December 1998 by Louise Aber and confirmed by Judge Richard May on the 21st of December 1998. Mr. Martinović, will you please rise? It has been you have been told that in this tribunal, which I represent on behalf of the President, Madam MacDonald, you're going to tell us clearly your name, your first name, your date and place of birth, your profession, if you have one, and your present residence, please. We're listening. Your Honors, I am Vinko Martinović, known as Stella, born on the 21st of September 1963 in the town of Mostar. By occupation, I am a restaurant owner. Currently, I am in the detention unit in The Hague.
Vous êtes marié?
Are you married? Do you have children? And where were you living? I am married. I have one child who is 3 years old. And your family is now living in Mostar? Was that your place of residence when you were transferred to The Hague? My family is living in Mostar now, and I lived there too before I was arrested and taken to Zagreb, from where I was transferred to The Hague. I surrendered voluntarily, and I said I would not appeal the decision.
Bien, je vous en remercie.
Very well, thank you. Today is your initial appearance before the International Criminal Tribunal for trying persons assumed responsible for crimes committed in the former Yugoslavia. This is a formality, but an important one. You must be present, fully conscious, with your attorney, because after your arrest, this is the second time that you have the opportunity to be informed of all the charges that the prosecutor has issued against you and which the judge confirmed, waiting, of course, for the evidence to be presented in a contradictory trial. I'm going to ask the registrar to remind us of the fundamental texts and rules which give you certain rights and which will then allow us to go on to the main part of this appearance, and that is to see whether you're going to plead guilty or not guilty, and to see on which counts you plead guilty or perhaps not guilty. So, Mr. Registrar, you may now be seated, Mr. Martinović, while this is being read, but please listen carefully, and so should your attorney, but I'm sure your attorney is very familiar with those texts. Mr. Registrar, will you read us the text of the statute and of the rules? First, Article 2 of the Statute of the Tribunal, Commencement and Conduct of Trial Proceedings. Point 3. The trial chamber shall read the indictment, satisfy itself that the rights of the accused are respected, confirm that the accused understands the indictment, and instruct the accused to enter a plea. The trial chamber shall then set the date for trial. 4. The hearing shall be public unless the trial chamber decides to close the proceedings in accordance with its rules of procedure and evidence. Article 21. Rights of the accused. 1. All persons shall be equal before the International Tribunal. 2. In the determination of charges against him, the accused shall be entitled to a fair and public hearing subject to Article 22 of the statute. Point 3. The accused shall be presumed innocent until proved guilty according to the provisions of the present statute. 4. In the determination of any charge against the accused pursuant to the present statute, the accused shall be entitled to the following minimum guarantees in full equality. A. To be informed promptly and in detail in a language which he understands of the nature and cause of the charge against him. B. To have adequate time and facilities for the preparation of his defense and to communicate with counsel of his own choosing. C. To be tried without undue delay. D. To be tried in his presence and to defend himself in person or through legal assistance of his own choosing, to be informed, if he does not have legal assistance, of this right, and to have legal assistance assigned to him in any case where the interests of justice so require, and without payment by him in any such case if he does not have sufficient means to pay for it. E. To examine or have examined the witnesses against him, and to obtain the attendance and examination of witnesses on his behalf, under the same conditions as witnesses against him. F. To have the free assistance of an interpreter if he cannot understand or speak the language used in the International Tribunal. G. Not to be compelled to testify against himself or to confess guilt. Then, Article 62 of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence of the Tribunal. Rule 62, initial appearance of the accused. Upon transfer of an accused to the seat of the tribunal, the President shall forthwith assign the case to a trial chamber. The accused shall be brought before that trial chamber without delay and shall be formally charged. The trial chamber shall 1. Satisfy itself that the right of the accused to counsel is respected. 2. Read or have the indictment read to the accused in a language the accused speaks and understands, and satisfy itself that the accused understands the indictment. 3. Inform the accused that within 30 days of the initial appearance, he or she will be called upon to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty on each count, but that, should the accused so request, he or she may immediately enter a plea of guilty or not guilty on one or more count. 4. If the accused fails to enter a plea at the initial or any further appearance, enter a plea of not guilty on the accused's behalf. 5. In case of a plea of not guilty, instruct the registrar to set a date for trial. 6. In case of a plea of guilty, act in accordance with Rule 62 bis. 7. Instruct the registrar to set such other dates as appropriate. And to wind up, Rule 62 bis, guilty pleas. If an accused pleads guilty in accordance with Rule 62(6), or requests to change his or her plea to guilty, and the trial chamber is satisfied that 1. The guilty plea has been made voluntarily, 2. The guilty plea is informed, 3. The guilty plea is not equivocal, and 4. There is a sufficient factual basis for the crime and the accused's participation in it, either on the basis of independent indicia or on lack of any material disagreement between the parties about the facts of the case. The trial chamber may enter a finding of guilt and instruct the registrar to set a date for the sentencing hearing. Thank you, Mr. Registrar. Mr. Širić, have you received the indictment in your own language?
Časni sude, dobili.
Your Honors, we have received the indictment in our language. You were able to discuss it with your client? Were you able to review it with your client? Yes, Your Honors. When the defense was served the indictment, I was able to have contact with him, and I was also able to contact him here in The Hague. Thank you. You may be seated. I'm going to ask the registrar to read the indictment. Mr. Registrar, I should like to remind you that the indictment applies to 2 persons. Yes, the indictment concerns Mr. Vinko Martinović, also known as Stella, as well as Mladen Naletilić, also known as Tuta. It is case number IT 9834I, the prosecutor versus Mladen Naletilić. Yes, but before you continue, I should like to draw attention of Mr. Martinović. You have heard, when the rules were read to you, that you have a possibility of delaying by 30 days your plea of guilty or not guilty. Did Mr. Širić convey this information to you clearly, Mr. Martinović? My question is to make sure that this has been clearly conveyed to you And have you decided to avail yourself of this time period of 30 days, or are you ready to plea on each count guilty or not guilty? Do you want to use this delay for a statement of guilt or not guilt? Or do you wish to plead today?
Maître Siric.
Mr. Šerić.
Just
Your Honor, we are ready today to enter a plea, and so is my client. Very well, thank you. Mr. Martinović, you can confirm that you are ready this very day to say whether you're guilty or not guilty on each count. Please stand up. Do you confirm what your attorney has just said, please? I do. Thank you. We are going to proceed as follows, Mr. Martinović, so that things should be quite clear. The registrar is going to read the indictment. You will remain seated during the reading, but at the end of each group of charges against you by the prosecution, I will ask you to stand, and I will ask you whether you plead guilty or not guilty. Do you understand that? I do. Very well. So now you may be seated, and when I tell you, you will rise. Listen carefully. These are charges made against you by the prosecutor. You may be seated for the time being, Mr. Martinović. On the other hand, Mr. Registrar, please stand up because we are reading the indictment. I'm sorry for that, but that is the proper way. The prosecutor versus Mladen Naletilić, also known as Tuta, and Vinko Martinović, also known as Stella. Indictment. The prosecutor of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, pursuant to her authority under Article 18 of the Statute of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, hereinafter the Statute of the Tribunal, charges Mladen Naletilić alias Tuta and Vinko Martinović alias Stella with crimes against humanity, grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions, and violations of the laws or customs of war. Background. On 25th of June 1991, Croatia declared its independence, which was suspended until the 8th of October 1991. The Republic of Croatia was recognized by the European Community on the 15th of January 1992, and it was admitted as a member state of the United Nations on the 22nd of May 1992. 2. Bosnia and Herzegovina declared its independence on 3rd of March 1992. The Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina was recognized by the European Community on the 6th of April 1992 and by the Republic of Croatia on the 7th of April 1992. The Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina was admitted as a member state of the United Nations on the 22nd of May 1992. 3. The Croatian Community of Herceg-Bosna, HZHB, proclaimed its existence on the 18th of November 1991 and claimed to be a separate or distinct political, cultural, economic, and territorial whole in the territory of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Its purposes included, inter alia, the establishment of closer ties with the Republic of Croatia. These aspirations, which were supported by the Republic of Croatia, were evidenced by the HZHB's use of the Croatian currency and the Croatian language, and the granting by the Republic of Croatia of Croatian citizenship to Bosnian Croats. 4. The Constitutional Court of the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina declared the HZHB illegal on the 14th of September 1992. Neither the self-proclaimed HZHB nor the later self-proclaimed Croatian Republic of Herceg-Bosna, HRHB, were ever internationally recognized. 5. Article 3 of the HZHB proclamation of 18 November 1991 designated Mostar as the capital of this community. This designation of Mostar as capital of the self-proclaimed Croat community was reaffirmed by the decree issued by the president of the HZHB on 8 April 1992, setting up the Croatian Defense Council, hereinafter referred as HVO, as the supreme executive, administrative, and defense body of Herceg-Bosna, with its headquarters in Mostar, and the decree by such president on 28th of August 1993, by which the HZHB declared itself the HRHB. 6. The population of the municipality of Mostar prior to the beginning of the conflict, the 1991 official census, was composed of 126,628 inhabitants, of which 43,856, or 34.6%, were Muslims, 43,037, or 33.9%, were Croats, 23,846, or 18.8%, were Serbs, 12,768, or 9.9%, were Yugoslavs, and 3,121, or 2.4%, were others. The city of Mostar is the historical capital and the largest city of Herzegovina. The territory of the municipality of Mostar includes, among others, the following districts and villages: Raštani, Bijelo Polje, Vojno, Potoci, Rudnik, Ilići, Đikovina, Panjevina, Rodoć, Podhum, Zahum, and Blagaj. 7. At all times during the relevant period, the Army of the Republic of Croatia, HV, backed and supported the HVO and deployed its own units in Mostar and other municipalities of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Among the units that were acting in connection with the authorities of the Republic of Croatia and participated in joint actions with units of the HV was the Kažnjenička Bojna, Convicts Battalion, also known as the Punishment Battalion, Tutićeva Brigade, Tutići, or Tuta's Men, hereinafter referred to as KB, under the command of Mladen Naletilić. 8. As early as October 1992, the HVO launched an attack against the Bosnian Muslim population of the municipality of Prozor. Subsequently, the HV and the HVO participated in an armed conflict with the armed forces of the government of Bosnia-Herzegovina, ABIH, until February 1994. 9. In April 1993, the HVO launched a series of attacks against the Bosnian Muslim civilian population, such as the attack of Ahmići on the 16th of April and others in central Bosnia. At the same time, on the 17th of April 1993, forces of the HV and the HVO, including the KB, attacked the villages of Sovići and Doljani, municipality of Jablanica, under the overall command of Mladen Naletilić, and carried out the forcible transfer of the Bosnian Muslim population and destruction of their properties. Beginning simultaneously in April 1993, in the Herzegovinian municipalities of Stolac, Čapljina, and Mostar, the HVO carried out the arrest of prominent Bosnian Muslims and imposed different measures of persecution against the Bosnian Muslim population, such as dismissals from work positions and public service, discrimination in the delivery of humanitarian aid, attacks against Bosnian Muslim houses and properties, and imposition of Croat language and education. 10. On the 9th of May 1993, the HV and the HVO, including the KB, launched a large military offensive against the Bosnian Muslim population of Mostar and the positions of the ABIH in the city, provoking the start of an armed conflict with the ABIH in the municipality of Mostar. Subsequently, the Bosnian Muslim population was the target of a broad campaign of violence in the areas of Mostar occupied by the HV and the HVO, lasting at least until the ceasefire and peace agreements of February and March 1994. Across the confrontation line, the ABIH held a section of the city which was under siege by the HV and the HVO forces, who were shelling intensely the area and preventing the arrival of humanitarian aid and basic supplies. Mladen Naletelić, as commander of the KB, and Vinko Martinović, as commander of the Mrmak, or Vinko Škrobo subunit of the KB, were leading perpetrators of this campaign against the Bosnian Muslim population. 11. The goal of this campaign by the HV and HVO forces, commonly referred to as ethnic cleansing, was to gain control of the municipalities of Mostar, Jablanica, and other municipalities in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and to force the Bosnian Muslim population to leave these territories or to substantially reduce and subjugate this population. The means used for this purpose included killings, beatings, torture, evictions, destruction of cultural and religious heritage, looting, deprivation of basic civil and human rights, and mass expulsions, detentions, and imprisonments, all of them executed following a systematic pattern of ethnic discrimination. As a result of this campaign, tens of thousands of Bosnian Muslims abandoned Mostar, Jablanica, and other municipalities in Bosnia-Herzegovina. The traditional ethnic diversity of these municipalities was virtually eliminated, and an ethnically homogeneous society and institutions were imposed in these areas.
Les accusés.
The accused. Mladen Naletelić, also known as Tuta, son of Marta and Slavka, was born on 1st of December 1946 in Lištica, Široki Brijeg, in the municipality of Široki Brijeg, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Mladen Naletelić is by birth a Bosnian Croat, who later acquired the citizenship of the Republic of Croatia, which he maintains to date. Mladen Naletelić graduated from elementary school. Mladen Naletelić left the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia in the late 1960s or early 1970s and remained abroad until his return to his country of origin in 1990. 13. Vinko Martinović, also known as Stella, son of Ivan, was born on the 21st of September 1963 in Mostar, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Vinko Martinović is by birth a Bosnian Croat, who later acquired the citizenship of the Republic of Croatia, which he maintains to date. Superior authority. 14. At all times material to this indictment, Mladen Naletelić was the commander of the KB, a special unit founded by him on or about June 1991. The KB was composed of approximately 200 to 300 soldiers grouped in several subunits called ATG or ATJ, anti-terrorist groups or units with bases in the municipalities of Mostar, Lištica, Široki Brijeg, and Ljubuški. The main tasks of the KB were combat missions on the front line, expulsions and attacks against Bosnian Muslim civilians in the territories under HV and HVO occupation. The KB acted as part of or in coordination with the HVO and HV. 15. Mladen Naletelić exercised his control in military matters in a manner consistent with the exercise of superior authority, including the development of the organizational structure within the KB. He was involved in the management and control of the finances of the KB. Mladen Nalettilić was also in charge of disbursing the salaries of members of the KB, deciding on logistical and tactical matters, ensuring the combat readiness of his troops, planning the preparation and implementation of military operations performed either by the KB alone or in coordination with other HVO and HV units under the general command of both armies, and coordinating with high-ranking officers of the HZHB, the HRHB, and the Republic of Croatia. 16. Mladen Nalettilić exercised his authority over the members of the KB in a direct manner by meeting with his direct subordinates and KB subcommanders on virtually a daily basis, interacting with the rank-and-file soldiers frequently, visiting the different bases of the KB, and acting as field commander for certain military actions. 17. Vinko Martinović was a commander in the HOS, Croatian Defense Forces, militia in Mostar in 1992, and later joined the KB. At all times material to this indictment, Vinko Martinović was the commander of the KB subunit ATG Mrmak, later named Vinko Škrobo, and a subordinate to Mladen Nalettilić. In a manner consistent with the exercise of superior authority, Vinko Martinović participated in military operations under the command of the KB and in coordination with other HVO and HV units under the general command of both armies. At all times material to this indictment, in the city of Mostar, Vinko Martinović was in command of a section of the front line in the Boulevard Street, where the ATG Mrmak, later named Vinko Škrobo, was deployed under his command, and the base and facilities of this unit in the Kalemova Street. General allegations. 18. At all times relevant to this indictment, a state of international armed conflict and partial occupation existed on the territory of the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina. 19. All acts or omissions set forth as grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions of 1949, hereinafter grave breaches recognized by Article 2 of the Statute of the Tribunal, occurred during that international armed conflict and partial occupation. 20. All of the victims to whom the charges refer, whether they were civilians or prisoners of war, were, at all relevant times, persons protected by the Geneva Conventions of 1949. 21. In each paragraph charging crimes against humanity, the alleged acts or omissions were part of a widespread, large-scale or systematic attack directed against the Bosnian Muslim population. 22. The accused in this indictment were required to abide by the regulations of the laws or customs of war governing the conduct of war, including the Geneva Conventions of 1949. 23. Mladen Nalettilić and Vinko Martinović are individually responsible for the crimes with which they are charged in this indictment pursuant to Article 7.1 of the Statute of the Tribunal. Individual criminal responsibility involves planning, instigating, ordering, committing, or otherwise aiding and abetting in the planning, preparation, or execution of the acts or omissions set forth below. 24. Mladen Nalettilić and Vinko Martinović are also, or alternatively, responsible as superiors for the acts of their subordinates pursuant to Article 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal. A superior is responsible for the acts of his subordinates if the superior knew or had reason to know that his subordinate was about to commit such acts or had done so, and the superior failed to take the necessary and reasonable measures to prevent such further acts or to punish the perpetrators thereof. charges. Count 1, persecutions. 25. On the 17th of April 1993, in the municipality of Jablanica, the KB, along with other HV and HVO units, attacked the villages of Sovici and Doljani, and subsequently carried out the forcible transfer of the Bosnian Muslim population, destruction of their properties, and destruction of the Mosque of Sovici. Mladen Naletelić was the overall commander of this attack and ordered his subordinates to destroy the Bosnian Muslim properties and the Mosque of Sovici, to arrest all of the Bosnian Muslim adult males, and to expel and forcibly transfer Bosnian Muslim civilians to the territory under ABIH control. 26. In the municipality of Mostar, the forcible transfer and imprisonment of Bosnian Muslim civilians started simultaneously with the HV and HVO attack on the 9th of May 1993 and continued until at least January 1994. However, there were two large waves of forcible transfers and imprisonments. One in the days following the 9th of May 1993 attack, and a second during the first days of July 1993. Once the KB and other HVO units had identified persons of Muslim ethnic background, they arrested them, evicted them, plundered their homes, and forcibly transferred them to detention centers under HVO authority or across the confrontation lines to the territories under ABIH control. 27. Between April 1993 and until at least January 1994, thousands of Bosnian Muslim civilians were interned in the detention centers under HVO authority in the area of Mostar and neighboring municipalities. Beatings, torture, killings were common and persistent in these detention facilities. 28. The Heliodrome compound, located in Rodoc, municipality of Mostar, was the main detention center in the area. Bosnian Muslim civilians and prisoners of war arrested under the command of Mladen Naletelić and Vinko Martinović were interned in the Heliodrome. Members of the KB mistreated and tortured Bosnian Muslim detainees at the Heliodrome. Furthermore, throughout the relevant period, subordinates to Mladen Naletelić and Vinko Martinović regularly took detainees from the Heliodrome to the front lines to force them to perform labor and use them as human shields. 29. Throughout this period, Mladen Naletelić visited on numerous occasions the Heliodrome camp and had knowledge of the existence of Bosnian Muslim civilian prisoners and the inhumane conditions of this camp and the mistreatment of detainees. Mladen Naletelić was in contact with the commanders of the Heliodrome, had access to the main facilities of the compound, and exerted command over the KB troops based in the compound. 30. In the Kalamova street of the city of Mostar, the KB maintained the base of the subunit called ATG Mrmak, later named Vinko Škrogo, under the command of Vinko Martinović. Bosnian Muslim detainees were kept in this base, which was used as center for the attacks against Bosnian Muslim civilians, particularly evictions, looting, expulsions across the front lines, and use of detainees for forced labor and human shield purposes. Mladen Naletelić regularly visited these premises to meet Vinko Martinović and other KB members. 31. Mladen Naletelić knew of the existence of detention centers in Mostar and neighboring municipalities other than the Heliodrome, in which Bosnian Muslim civilians were interned and mistreated. In particular, Mladen Nalettilić had knowledge of the detention centers located in the municipality of Lištica, Široki Brijeg, such as the primary school of Dobrkovići, the MUP police station, and the bases of the KB in Lištica, Široki Brijeg, Ljubuški, and Mostar, where Bosnian Muslims were also detained. Bosnian Muslim detainees of the primary school of Dobrkovići were forced to work in Mladen Nalettilić's private estate. 32. Under the command of Mladen Nalettilić and Vinko Martinović, the KB forcibly transferred Bosnian Muslim civilians to the confrontation line in the municipality of Mostar and forced them to cross the confrontation line towards the ABIH side. Mladen Nalettilić and Vinko Martinović gave orders to expel the Bosnian Muslim population and loot and destroy their houses and properties. 33. Throughout this period, Mladen Nalettilić and Vinko Martinović repeatedly tortured Bosnian Muslim detainees, ordered their subordinates to torture Bosnian Muslims, and by their example instigated their subordinates to commit and carry out torture. Severe physical and mental suffering was intentionally inflicted on Bosnian Muslims for the following purposes: to obtain from them information, to punish them, to retaliate due to adverse developments in the front lines, to intimidate them, or based on their ethnicity or religion. 34. Between about April 1993 and at least January 1994, Mladen Nalettilić, as commander of the KB, and Vinko Martinović, as commander of the Mrmak or Vinko Škrobo subunit of the KB, together with other leaders, agents, and members of the HV and HVO, planned, instigated, ordered, or committed, or aided and abetted the planning, preparation, or execution of a crime against humanity through the widespread or systematic persecutions of Bosnian Muslim civilians on political, racial, ethnic, or religious grounds throughout the territory claimed to belong to the HZHB and HRHB by the following means, including, as applicable, the acts and conduct described in counts 2 through 22 below. A. Unlawfully confining, detaining, forcibly transferring, and deporting Bosnian Muslim civilians, including as described in paragraphs 53 and 54. B. Subjecting Bosnian Muslims to torture and inhumane acts, inhuman and cruel treatment, murdering and willfully killing them, willfully causing them great suffering, using them to perform unlawful and forced labor, including on the confrontation lines in Mostar, and using them as human shields, which in some instances resulted in their death, including as described in paragraphs 35 to 52, not 32 as in the French version, that is 35 to 52. C. Destroying and wantonly devastating Bosnian Muslim dwellings and buildings, including as described in paragraphs 55, 56, and 58, and D. Plundering public and private property of Bosnian Muslims, including as described in paragraph 57. Wait, Mr. Registrar, I shall now ask Mr. Martinović to stand up.
Pour toutes les considérations qui viennent d'être lues, Monsieur le greffier va vous lire le...
Because of what has just been read, the registrar is going to read count 1. So please read count 1, and then you will tell us whether you plead guilty or not guilty on count number 1. So please repeat that.
Chef.
By these acts and omissions, Vinko Martinović committed count 1, persecutions on political, racial, and religious grounds, a crime against humanity as recognized by Articles 5H, 7.1, and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
How do you plead, guilty or not guilty on this count, Mr. Martinović? Not guilty.
Bien, je note que
I will take note of your not guilty plea. Mr. Registrar, please record that, and we may sit down, Mr. Martinović. We will continue with the reading of the counts of the indictment.
Counts 2 to 8, unlawful labor and human shields as inhuman treatment and willful killing. 35. Between about April 1993 and at least through January 1994, Mladen Naletelić, Vinko Martinović, and their subordinates forced Bosnian Muslim detainees from the various detention centers under the authority of the HVO to perform labor in military operations and to be used as human shields on the Boulevard and Shanticheva streets. In Vrashtani, Stotina, and other locations along the front line in the municipality of Mostar. 36. Following the HV and HVO attack on the city of Mostar on the 9th of May 1993, the confrontation line with the ABIH was settled along the Boulevard and Shanticheva streets. From May 1993 to February 1994, the KB was engaged in fighting along the Boulevard and Shanticheva streets and had control over particular sections of this confrontation line. This confrontation line was both the scene of intense small arms fire and artillery exchanges between the opposing factions, and it was the main site to which Bosnian Muslim prisoners were taken to perform forced labor and to be used as human shields. 37. From May 1993 through at least January 1994, on a regular basis, detainees were taken from the Heliodrome camp and other detention centers to the bases of the KB in the city of Mostar for eventual transfer to the confrontation lines. The detainees were forced at great risk to their lives to perform various dangerous military support tasks benefiting the HV and HVO, including digging trenches, building defenses with sandbags, carrying wounded or killed HVO soldiers, carrying ammunition and explosives across the confrontation line, and placing them in front of ABIH positions. These tasks were often performed by the detainees under conditions which exposed them directly to hostile fire and thereby served the purpose of protecting HVO soldiers. Consequently, the detainees were turned into human shields. On other occasions, the KB used detainees exclusively to protect the KB and other HV and HVO soldiers from hostile fire or to attract hostile fire on the detainees in order to ascertain the ABIH positions. 38. The circumstances of intense fire exchange and the direct exposure of the detainees and prisoners to such fire, adding to the short distance between the two warring factions, presented a high likelihood of death or serious injury to the detainees and prisoners. Mladen Naletelić and Vinko Martinović were aware of these circumstances. The knowing exposure of the Bosnian Muslim detainees to these conditions resulted in their inhuman treatment and, in some instances, injuries and death. 39. From May 1993 to January 1994, Mladen Naletelić repeatedly visited the Heliodrome camp and the bases of the KB in the city of Mostar, where he met his subordinates and detainees. Mladen Naletelić had knowledge of the use of prisoners and detainees for forced labor and human shields, and was also aware of the resulting injuries and deaths based on his presence at relevant sites and the reports he received from his subordinates. 40. Throughout this period, Vinko Martinović, as the commander of a subunit Mrmak or Vinko Škrobo, regularly used detainees for forced labor in military operations and as human shields along the confrontation lines in the city of Mostar. 41. On 17 September 1993, the HV and HVO launched an offensive on the positions of the ABIH along the Boulevard and Chanticheva streets in the city of Mostar. As part of this offensive, Vinko Martinović ordered and directed the use of Bosnian Muslim detainees for military attack purposes in the part of the Boulevard front line under his command. Following the orders of Vinko Martinović, several detainees were given imitation wooden rifles and military clothing and were forced to walk alongside a tank moving towards the enemy positions. The purpose of this action was to prompt fire from the ABIH positions against the disguised detainees in order that the attacking HVO tank could ascertain these enemy positions. 42. On the same day and about the same time, approximately 15 prisoners and detainees were deployed as human shields in an adjacent section of the Boulevard front line under the command of Vinko Martinović in order to protect attacking HVO soldiers. Approximately 10 detainees were killed as a result of their use as human shields, including the following: Aziz Cholaković, Hamdia Cholaković, Enis Pajo. 43. On 23 September 1993, Mladen Naletrić commanded an attack by the KB on the village of Rashtani, municipality of Mostar. In the course of the attack, Bosnian Muslim detainees taken from the heliodrome were forced to walk in front of the attacking forces and to enter and search enemy positions. The detainees were forced to perform these tasks, exposed to the ongoing exchange of fire at great risk to their lives. 44. Throughout this period, Mladen Naletrić, Vinko Martinović and their subordinates also forced the Bosnian Muslim detainees to perform labor in locations other than the front lines. The Bosnian Muslim detainees were forced inter alia to engage and participate in the following works: building, maintenance and reparation works in private properties of the members and commanders of the KB, digging trenches, building defenses in the positions of the KB or other HV and HVO forces, and assisting the KB members in the process of looting houses and properties of Bosnian Muslims. Will you stand up?
Martinović, following what has just been read in the indictment, these are counts from number 2 to number 8. Mr. Registrar is going to read them out, and I will ask you for each count whether you plead guilty or not guilty.
Acts and omissions. Vinko Martinović committed count 2, inhumane acts, a crime against humanity, as recognized by Articles 5I, 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty, Mr. Martinović? Not guilty.
Count 3, inhuman treatment, a grave breach of the Geneva Conventions of 1949 as recognized by Articles 2b and 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty? Not guilty.
Count 4, cruel treatment, a violation of the laws or customs of war under Statute Article 3 as recognized by Article 3.1a of the Geneva Conventions and Statute Articles 7.1 and 7.3.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty? Not guilty.
Count 5, unlawful labor, a violation of the laws or customs of war under Statute Article 3 as recognized by Article 51 of Geneva Convention 4 and Articles 49 and 50 of Geneva Convention 3 and Statute Articles 7.1 and 7.3.
Martinović, do you plead guilty or not guilty? Not guilty.
Count 6, murder, a crime against humanity as recognized by Articles 5A, 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty, Mr. Martinović? Not guilty.
Count 7, willful killing, a gay breach of the Geneva Conventions of 1949 as recognized by Articles 2A, 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Coupable.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty, Mr. Martinović? Not guilty.
Count 8, murder, a violation of the law or customs of war under Statute Article 3 as recognized by Article 3.1a of the Geneva Conventions and Statute Articles 7.1 and 7.3.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty? Not guilty.
Vous asseoir.
Please be seated. We are now going to read counts 9 to 12. Counts 9 to 12. Torture and willfully causing great suffering. 45. Beginning in May 1993 and at least through January 1994, Mladen Naletilić, Vinko Martinović and their subordinates tortured or willfully caused great suffering to Bosnian Muslim civilians and prisoners of war captured by the KB or detained under the authority of the HVO. Severe physical and mental suffering was intentionally inflicted on Bosnian Muslims, detainees, for the following purposes: to obtain from them information, to punish them, to retaliate due to adverse developments in the front lines, or to intimidate them based on their ethnicity or religion. Throughout this period, Mladen Naletilić and Vinko Martinović repeatedly committed, aided, and abetted torture, willfully caused great suffering, and by their example instigated and encouraged their subordinates to torture or cause great suffering on Bosnian Muslim detainees. 46. Mladen Naletilić committed and instigated the commission of torture or the infliction of great suffering on Bosnian Muslim detainees on the 20th of April 1993, following the attack against the Bosnian Muslim population of Sovici and Doljani, carried out by HV and HVO forces under his overall command. 47. In the context of the preparations of the HV and HVO attack on Mostar on the 7th of May 1993, unidentified members of the KB arrested in Mostar witness B, whom at the time was a prominent figure within the Bosnian Muslim community, and took him to a base of the KB in Lishtica Široki Brijeg. At that base, Mladen Naletilić and his subordinates tortured witness B, causing severe injuries. 48. Following the HV and HVO attack on Mostar on the 10th of May 1993, Mladen Naletilić physically assaulted witness M, who was a prisoner of war captured in Mostar by Mladen Naletilić's subordinates. Mladen Naletilić hit repeatedly witness M in an open area of the streets of Mostar in the presence of his subordinates and other commanders of the HVO. 49. Throughout this period, Vinko Martinović repeatedly beat, in the presence of his subordinates, Bosnian Muslim detainees in the area under his command and Bosnian Muslim civilians in the process of their eviction and deportation. 50. Throughout this period, the beatings and torture of Bosnian Muslim civilians and prisoners of war became a common practice of the members of the KB. Beatings and torture of Bosnian Muslim civilians and prisoners of war were committed by a larger number of members of the KB, including commanders. These beatings and tortures were committed at different bases of the KB in Mostar, Lishtica, Široki Brijeg, and Ljubuški. Beatings and tortures were also inflicted at other detention centers and camps under the authority of the HVO, such as the Ljubuški prison, the Heliodrome camp. Beatings and tortures were additionally inflicted at several other locations following the capture of prisoners. Mladen Naletelić and Vinko Martinović knew, or had reason to know, that their subordinates were about to commit such acts, or had done so, and they failed to take the necessary and reasonable measures to prevent such further acts or to punish the perpetrators thereof.
The accused will now rise and will tell us how you play on this count, so that is 9, 10, 11, and 12.
By these acts and commissions, Vinko Martinović committed count 9, torture, a crime against humanity under Articles 5F, 7.1, and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Nisam kriv.
Not guilty.
Count 10, torture, a grave breach of the Geneva Conventions of 1949 and a statute Article 2B and 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Martinović.
Mr. Martinović, do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Nisam kriv.
Not guilty.
Count 11, cruel treatment, a violation of the laws or customs of war under Statute Article 3 as recognized by Article 3.1a of the Geneva Conventions and Article 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty, Mr. Martinović?
Nisam kriv.
Not guilty.
Count 12, willfully causing great suffering or serious injury to body or health, a grave breach of the Geneva Conventions of 1949 and Articles 2C, 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Mr. Martinović, do you plead guilty or not guilty on count 12?
Nisam kriv.
Not guilty. You may be seated. Mr. Registrar, will you now read counts 13 to 17, please?
Count 13 to 17, murder, willful killing, and willfully causing great suffering of Nenad Harmandzic. 51. Nenad Harmandzic, son of Salko, born in Mostar on the 19th of February 1947, was taken in July 1993 with a group of approximately 50 detainees from the Heliodrome camp to the base of the subunit of the KB under the command of Vinko Martinović, known as ATG Anti-Terrorist Group, Mrmak or Vinko Škrobo, located in the Kalemova Street in the city of Mostar. Vinko Martinović was present at the base and was exercising direct command when the group of prisoners, including Nenad Harmandzic, arrived. 52. On the same day, following the arrival of Nenad Harmandzic at the facilities of the Kalemova Street, he met Vinko Martinović and was thereafter the subject of severe beatings by subordinates under the command of Vinko Martinović. Later, on the same day, Nenad Harmandzic was killed by subordinates of Vinko Martinović.
Mr. Martinović, who will rise now. Mr. Registrar.
By these acts and omissions, Vinko Martinović committed count 13, murder, a crime against humanity, as recognized by Articles 5A, 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Mr. Martinović, do you plead guilty or not guilty on count 13?
Nisam kriv.
Not guilty.
Count 14, willful killing, a grave breach of the Geneva Conventions of 1949, as recognized by Articles 2A, 7.1, and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Vous plaidez non coupable.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty, Mr. Martinović?
Nisam kriv.
Not guilty.
Chef.
Count 15, murder, a violation of the laws or customs of war under Statute Article 3, as recognized by Article 3.1a of the Geneva Conventions and Article 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Coupable, Monsieur Martin.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty, Mr. Martinović?
Nisam kriv.
Not guilty.
Count 16. Alternatively, Count 16, cruel treatment, a violation of the laws or customs of war under Statute Article 3, as recognized by Article 3.1a of the Geneva Conventions and Article 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Plaidez non coupable.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty if these counts are maintained, Mr. Martinović? Not guilty.
Une seconde simplement, Monsieur le greffier. Madame,
Just a moment,
Just a
Mr.
moment. 17 is also an alternative count. Is that how we should interpret the count?
d'accord.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Hollis. Count 17.
It is also, alternatively, willfully causing great suffering or serious injury to body or health, a grave breach of the Geneva Conventions of 1949, under Articles 2C, 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Monsieur Martinović.
Mr. Martinović, do you plead guilty or not guilty? Not guilty.
Vous pouvez vous asseoir.
You may be seated. Count 18, Registrar, please.
Chef 18.
Count 18, forcible transfer. 53. On about the 17th of April, 1993, following the plans and under the overall command of Mladen Naletilić, the KB, along with other HV and HVO forces, attacked the villages of Sovici and Doljani in the municipality of Jablanica. After the capture of Sovici, the attacking forces forcibly interned several hundred Bosnian Muslim civilians in the local primary school on the 18th and 19th of April 1993. On the following days, the forces under the command of Mladen Naletilić confined the whole of the Bosnian Muslim civilian population of Sovici, around 450 women, children, and elderly, to the hamlet of Januzovici and forcibly transferred them subsequently to the territory of Gornji Vakuf under the control of the ABIH. 54. In the municipality of Mostar, Mladen Naletilić and Vinko Martinović were responsible for and ordered the forcible transfer of Bosnian Muslim civilians that started on the 9th of May 1993 and continued until at least January 1994. The KB members under their command were prominent in the eviction, arrest, and forcible transfers of Bosnian Muslim civilians throughout the relevant period, and particularly during the two large waves of forcible transfers that took place in May and July 1993. Once the KB and other HVO units had identified persons of Muslim ethnic background, they arrested them, evicted them, plundered their homes, and forcibly transferred them across the confrontation lines to the territories under ABIH control. The ABIH held a section of the city which was under siege by the HV and HVO forces, who were shelling intensely the area and preventing the arrival of humanitarian aid and basic supplies. Mladen Naletilić and Vinko Martinović commanded operations for this purpose and gave orders to their subordinates to proceed with the forcible transfers.
Mr. Martinović, you will rise now. Registrar.
By these acts or omissions, Vinko Martinović committed count 18, unlawful transfer of a civilian, a grave breach of the Geneva Conventions of 1949, as recognized by Articles 2G, 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Monsieur Martinović.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty, Mr. Martinović?
Nisam kriv.
Not guilty.
Asseyez-vous.
Thank you. You may sit down. Counts 19 to 22.
Counts 19 to 22, destruction and plunder of property. 55. Following the capture of Sovici and Doljani on the 17th of April, 1993, Mladen Naletilić ordered the destruction of all the Bosnian Muslim houses in the area. The systematic destruction of the Bosnian Muslim houses was carried out by the forces under the authority of Mladen Naletilić, who, at the relevant time, was in command over the area occupied by the HV and HVO forces. 56. Following the capture of Sovici and Doljani on the 17th of April, 1993, Mladen Naletilić ordered the destruction of the mosque of Sovici. The mosque was destroyed by the forces under the authority of Mladen Naletilić, who, at the relevant time, was in command over the area occupied by the HV and HVO forces. 57. Following the HV and HVO attack on Mostar of 9th May 1993, and in the context of the subsequent campaign of persecutions against the Bosnian Muslim population, the units under the command of Mladen Naletilić and Vinko Martinović plundered systematically the Bosnian Muslim houses and properties. 58. Following the capture of the village of Rashtani, municipality of Mostar, on the 23rd of September 1993, the forces under the command of Mladen Naletilić destroyed the Bosnian Muslim houses of the village.
Martinović.
Mr. Martinović, you will rise. Registrar.
By these acts and omissions, Vinko Martinović committed count 19, extensive destruction of property, a grave breach of the Geneva Conventions recognized by Articles 2D, 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Plaidez non coupable.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty, Mr. Martinović? Not guilty.
Count 20. Wanton destruction not justified by military necessity, a violation of the laws or customs of war as recognized by Articles 3B, 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Plaidez non coupable.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty, Mr. Martinović? Not guilty.
Count 21. Plunder of public or private property, a violation of the laws or customs of war as recognized by Articles 3E, 7.1 and 7.3 of the statute.
Monsieur Martinović.
Mr. Martinović, do you plead guilty or not guilty? Not guilty.
Count 22. Seizure, destruction, or willful damage done to institutions dedicated to religion, a violation of the laws or customs of war, as recognized by Articles 3D, 7.1 and 7.3 of the Statute of the Tribunal.
Coupable, Monsieur.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty, Mr. Martinović? Not guilty. Thank you. You may be seated, Mr. Martinović. Registrar.
The indictment was signed by Louis Arbour on the 18th day of December, 1998. Thank you, Mr. Registrar. We are now going to organize the work of the trial chamber for the weeks to come and remind both sides of their obligations. Let me address first the Office of the Prosecutor. Ms. Hollis, are you going to take the floor? Or your colleague? To ask you where you stand After reminding you of the obligations with respect to the defense in accordance with the provisions of Article 70A, that is disclosure of the supporting material that you provided to Judge May and the previous statements of the accused. You have a deadline of 30 days after the initial appearance. What steps have you taken? What do you intend to do? And where do you stand?
Yes, Your Honor, we have submitted the confirmation material for translation into a language the accused understands. It is further our intention to provide a copy of the supporting material to defense counsel in the language the material currently is in, so that he may begin to review the substance of that material. That is the steps that we have taken regarding the confirmation materials.
Pour l'instant, nous
Yes. For the moment, I wish to make sure that you have disclosed what is necessary under 66A, that is the prior statements of the accused. Mr. Šerić, do you have all these documents in your hands in your language, in the Serbo-Croatian language?
Časni sud, obrana nije dobila ništa.
Your Honor, the defense has not received anything. We do not have those materials. Ms. Hollis? For the moment, counsel does not have those materials. You do have 30 days, but I would like it to be done as soon as possible. That is the material that you have. Perhaps there's a problem of translation, but you know that as from now, the time is running for the period when everything has to be disclosed for the preliminary motions. I want our debates to start as soon as possible, of course, in the context of our timetable, which is very busy. Ms. Hollis, will you be able to disclose all this to your colleague on the opposite side?
Your Honor, as I noted earlier, in accordance with the rule, which requires us to provide this material to the accused in a language he understands, we have submitted the material to the translation unit so that it will be translated into the Croatian language for the accused. We have taken that step with a cover letter to the translation unit indicating the provisions of the rule that we must serve this on the defense counsel within 30 days of today. And we have requested them to make this the highest priority so that we may meet that obligation. To further assist the defense, we will provide the confirmation material in the language it currently is in, which in this case would be either English for the statements. We also have some documents that are in Spanish. We will provide that material in its original language to the defense. Our intention is to have that material ready to send to the defense by Tuesday of next week. We have no statements of the accused other than any statements we may be aware of that he gave in the courts in Croatia. So at this point, we have no statements of the accused to provide to him. And those are the steps that we have taken, Your Honor, and we are very cognizant of the 30-day rule.
Je vous en remercie.
Thank you. You are replacing your colleague, who is the usual legal counsel of this chamber. Will you make sure that these documents will be served by Tuesday or as quickly as possible? Will you make sure of that? Thank you for that. Madam Prosecutor, when will you be able to communicate the statements of witnesses, the witnesses that you have called? Do you envisage a long trial or a shorter trial? How many witnesses do you plan to call? Because this will determine not only the status conferences, because for the moment I will be in charge of that, I will see whether I could designate one of my colleagues in the next few weeks, but I am now the pretrial judge. And within the framework of these pretrial proceedings, I'm asking you, will the prosecution have a large number of witnesses to call?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we expect an approximate number of witnesses for the prosecution will be 78.
Bon, nous en reparlerons.
We'll talk about that at the status conference again. You know that there have been trials here in which up to 100 witnesses have been called, but we will come back to that at the status conference to see whether we can reduce the number of witnesses. Of course, that is your case. But it is also the concern of the President of the Chamber, who wants to make sure that we work efficiently, bearing in mind the other trials that are within the terms of reference of this Chamber. Thank you. We will be coming back to that at the status conference in closed session. Mr. Šerić, do you intend, and that is your right, of course, after having been served with all the supporting material with the indictment, have you already, on the basis of the indictment that you have seen, do you intend to submit any preliminary motions? Are you able to tell us that already today?
Časni sude, nisam u mogućnosti.
Your Honors, unfortunately, I'm not in a position to tell you that today. When I get the supporting material from the prosecutor, then, of course, I shall be able to know much more about that, and I shall be able to talk about it at the pretrial conference. Thank you. I believe we shall have this conference. I believe we shall be able to somehow set the date for it after those 30 days. I believe, therefore, that 30 days we have the period as of today, 30 days, and we shall be taking note, of course, of the disclosure of documents and the mutual disclosure of documents. This and Mr. Diviso and others will take care of that. Yes, Mr. President. Of course, we have to remember that we have a very heavy schedule. We have a trial which is very long. So it will also affect the decision which will be taken. But I believe that the registrar keeps everything under control. And I believe that the court come back from the recess on the 30th of August. Then we have General Krstic. I believe that is a trial which begins in the autumn. What I'm talking is, so will you please, both the prosecution and the defense, think well about after this initial appearance and to indeed abide by the dates which are at their disposal to complete to disclose all the documents. But at present, I do not think that we can really set in advance the date. But Mrs. Hollis, would you like to add anything else?
No, Your Honor. The prosecution has nothing further to add at this time.
Merci, Madame Hollis. Monsieur.
Thank you, Ms. Hollis. Mr. Šerić, do you have any statement to make or any comment? You know that in this chamber, as of course in others, the legal officer, in this case Mr. King and Mr. Formi, who are both extremely talented and hard-working, are there to establish a kind of liaison between the parties. And of course, I intend to organize a pretrial conference. Have you any observations to make regarding this particular hearing or any others?
Časni sude, nemam ništa reći, mogu samo...
Your Honors, I have nothing else to say. I'm very happy with this initial appearance. Thank you.
Very well. I should now like to ask Mr. Martinović to stand Do you wish to make any statement? First, let me ask you your conditions of detention. I think you were transferred on Monday. Are you satisfied with your conditions of detention? Speak quite openly, feel at ease. You are addressing a judge, and we are ready to hear you. You are satisfied. Very well. Do you have any other statements to make before we adjourn, if you wish to make a statement or not?
No.
Very well, you may be seated again and wait for the tribunal, which on this occasion I alone represent, to rise and adjourn. The hearing is adjourned.